anxious to share this with you as a kind of approach that maybe I haven't heard before. Maybe many of you are already doing this, and we'll have a really good conversation. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. We'll treat it as a roundtable. My idea this morning is that I will make an introduction overview to the program itself, and then we're lucky enough to have 3 and a 4th faculty fellow who have gone through the program join us to talk about their experiences in the program. And be able to give you examples of what they've done in their year-long fellowship. So with that, let me just begin with introductions since they're not in the program. We have to my left here, Amanda Bridges, who is from Graphic Communications, which is located in the business department at Clemson University. Next to her, we have Rochelle Beckner, who is a communications specialist, but embedded in civil engineering. In other words, she actually is homed now in civil engineering. And then we have Lee Jenkins, who is a professor in math and physics and mathematical sciences. Is that right?
Mathematical.
Oh, sorry, statistics and mathematical. I said that wrong again. Please say.
Okay. Just say math.
Math. She said math. Sorry. And so you can see we have a broad range of disciplines represented here. Our last panelist will be Arwen Declan, and she's from Prisma Health. And so she's actually just affiliated with Clemson University, but actually runs her program from the hospital system in Greenville. So it's a very, very sort of interesting mix of folks that we've been working with. So let's see. So let's begin. Okay. All right. And we can go right to the next slide, David. Thank you. All right. So just as the slide is coming up a little bit, just to say a word about Pearce Center. So Pearce Center for Professional Communication has been your host during this conference. And it was established, as you might have heard from, okay, here's our panelist, Arwen Declan. Thank you so much. We just made introductions, so you're hardly late at all. Thanks for joining us, Arwen. Was established in, as you maybe heard from Art Young's keynote address on the first day, that it was established in 1989. Art arranged for the Pearce Center and for Mr. Pearce. What's Mr. Pearce's name? First name?
Roy.
With what?
Pearce?
Yeah. Yes.
Roy,
that's right, Roy. Roy and Marnie Pearce. Roy was a very successful businessman, but always accredited communication skills to his success in business, and wanted to make a donation to start this center, Pearce Center. So that was in 1989. Art and Kathleen worked with Roy Pearce to cajole his class of 1941 to donate further funds, which provided our studio space, and that opened its doors in 2004. So that's a little bit of the background on Pearce Center. I joined Pearce Center in 2016 with the aim of actually sort of coming back to the very robust program that Art and Kathleen had, in addition to Carl Lovett, of course, very important, to the WAC and WID programming that Pearce Center had sort of gotten away from. And so we jumped in there to try to do that kind of programming. And one key element of that has been the Pearce Faculty Fellows Program, even though this is only 2 years old. We started in 2021. Lee Jenkins was in the first cohort of 5, and the rest of our folks here were in the second cohort, but that has just been this past year. Pierce Faculty Fellows began as an outreach program, and in part to find out where in the heck writing was happening and communication programs were happening on campus already. Um, as you know, it's easy to get siloed. And so I just didn't have a good feel for where writing was always happening elsewhere, but I knew it was. And so Faculty Fellows was a way to connect with faculty to see what was happening elsewhere. So, and of course, I was interested in establishing or identifying future partners with whom I could work because part of starting this program was to launch our faculty outreach. So in kind of a unusual way, when I first came in, I started with graduate student program. And so I worked on that for several years and it's now up and running. And then I turned to our faculty program. Okay, so the key elements, maybe we could go, oh, we're already on key elements. Thank you, you're ahead of me. So first and foremost, I would like to just say that the projects, sorry, maybe just to say that the Pierce Faculty Fellows apply to the program, are selected, get a grant for a year's work, are paid a stipend for their work, and are able and invited to work on a project that will benefit writing and communication curriculums in their own department. What do they need to do? What problems do they want to solve by joining Faculty Fellows that can further their efforts in introducing more writing and communication in their disciplines? And that was that's probably the first element. The second element is, of course, just to related to that, of course, is that all the projects are discipline based. Even though we spend the time talking about writing and we talk with writing experts, one of whom is in our room here, Megan Callow, who came and to talk to our Pierce Faculty Fellows. All the projects that are designed here are embedded in their disciplines and rise as problems to solve from their disciplinary experiences. Transfer in this particular case, or transferable, what we had hoped was that we would have this core of faculty who would then go back to their departments and share their experiences with other faculty, and also students, of course. Their students directly benefit from their programs, from their projects, but also to, I know, for instance, I don't know if Lee is talking about this, but she started a writing committee in math subsequent to her time as a Pierce Faculty Fellow. So that kind of transferability. Cohort. So this is a place to form so they can meet each other. Where are like-minded faculty on the campus? And hopefully we've met both formally once a month and informally when we could. The first year, our informal gatherings were a little limited because of COVID, but we did actually meet. Our final meeting, we met out on the patio. We met outside for dinner, which was so lovely, right here at Soleil on the Green. So it was very nice to get together, and I remember our dinner fondly with that. So, and finally, it's sort of arranged faculty learning community style. So when we meet once a month on Zoom, we have prepared by reading 3 articles that are selected around a particular topic. And one of the authors of one of the articles, the author of one of the articles, we invite to join us as an expert to talk about writing as they understand it, or as they have written about it in their article, with our disciplinary folks. And that has, I hope, Megan, maybe you'll test to afterwards how that works for you. But it was a nice arrangement. So they gave a very brief presentation. It was 20-minute presentation with 10 minutes Q&A, but gave a little bit of a chance to have an interchange between disciplinary folks working on their projects and the writing expert who could contribute to that. Okay, so the next slide. In addition to Megan, we've had people here at the conference. Julia Voss, Chris Baskier joined us, Kathy Yancey, Lindsay Holmes, all those folks have joined us at various times. Okay, so as I mentioned, the goals for the program are basically along with the design of the program. I guess that makes sense. We really launched Pierce Faculty Fellows. We launched Pierce Faculty Fellows in order to launch the faculty workshop series that we plan to do, and also I would just say that the conference is sort of a way to launch our faculty development program, to give a little more visibility to Pierce Center. I have to say personally, I was delighted that the provost came and spoke for 10 minutes so that he could see the range of all of you people sitting out in the breakfast room and realize that, you know, that we were a movement, if you will. And then I would say that several years ago, advanced writing was removed at Clemson from the Gen Ed requirement. But at the same time, majors still wanted advanced writing, science writing, technical writing, business writing. And so they looked to the English department. So there was at the same time, there was a diminishment of advanced writing on the campus because it was no longer a Gen Ed requirement, and also an increased demand on the English department, which was kind of a clash of responsibilities, if you will, because the English department was never able to offer enough classes that met the demand for the disciplines. And so and so what that does, though, is open this opportunity for a re-emergence of writing in the discipline. So we can begin to decentralize the writing and emphasize that decentralization. Okay, so that's really our goals. And I'm just going to wrap up by a quick mention. If we're at our last slide, the outcomes are really why our faculty are here to talk with us. They are the outcomes. But there were several folks that could not join us. The faculty fellows have consisted of 5 faculty fellows each semester, each year. So several who could not be here. Karen High of the Engineering and Science Education Department on campus, which is a graduate program, started a new STEM communication class. She laid the foundation as a faculty fellow. She launched the class. It is now up and running. Yay. Shauna Hirsch did a really interesting program. She was from education, and she started this tele-mentoring program she was doing, offering a class to working science and education professionals across the United States who are needing some support in terms of writing education themselves. So she did this telementoring program, was very cool. Amy Scaroni is in extension, so she's working out in the field with the public, and so she was her project was to prepare a series of workshops that could be both delivered to the public and also modified to help graduate students work in this field. Natural resources. She specifically works on water preservation and water management. And then Cassie May, I would mention, is in biological sciences, and she was very interested in redesigning her curriculum for her MA students who, again, are working online. So those were some of the kinds of things that were done, but we have much more specific outcomes here from our panelists. That's all from me. Let's see, who is up next? This might be random because I just put them in as I delivered them. So the next one up is David Rome. And Arwin, I was just telling folks, and Lee maybe too, we're going to use a microphone. It doesn't project out there, but it projects to our online participants. So I'm going to pass the microphone down. So Lee, would you like to be next?
I can go next.
Okay, so great. So Lee Jenkins from math is our school board. And so maybe it is only right that you can start with you, Lee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cameron, for inviting me and for organizing this panel session so that we can share and collaborate ideas for increasing the presence of writing in the disciplines. In mathematics, what I have found is that people tend to think of writing in mathematics as writing proofs. That is the standard outcome or the standard deliverable for a lot of our majors. But I teach a lot of engineering. I am an applied mathematician, and my focus is on computational math. And my courses consist mainly of mechanical engineering majors. There's one course that I teach in particular that is only for mechanical engineering majors. So one of the things that I found with this course is that I could get engineers to complete some tasks, but I needed them to understand what they were doing. And often if I went back to them and said, okay, what did you just do? They had difficulty telling me. So they're very good at completing procedural tasks, but then I wanted them to reflect on what they had done and put it in a larger context. So in this class in particular, I started making a daily deliverable. I call it daily, but it was, each class period of an executive summary. So we did these things. Tell me what you did and write it quickly. I want you to think about this as practice for a 5-second interview, or you're talking to someone, an elevator pitch. You need to be able to take this information, you need to summarize it effectively and pull out the major points. So I started working on having them do executive summaries of the stuff that we had done in class. And I'll also mention that this class I've been developing over time. So I started this class as a standard lecture class. It has a heavy computational component. I realized that the students had trouble computing, so I started turning this thing into activities that we completed. And then it just kept evolving into this executive summary. And then I heard about the Faculty Fellows Program, and I thought it'd be great to participate in this and to get more information on how I can incorporate more writing components. Like I write as a mathematician. I stress to my students all the time, I had no idea how much writing I would do once I got out of school, but that tends to be the majority of what I've done. I worked in industry for 5 years as a statistician. I said everything was a memo. And that executive summary on that memo was the most important part, because that was the part that your management team or your customers were going to read. So you need to have that well defined. Then, as I was in the Faculty Fellows Program, I was able to start thinking more broadly about how I would bring this stuff to the math majors that I would teach. One of the courses that I teach for my math majors is a modeling course. So I have them read. That's an important part of the writing process, is reading information and then turning back and reflecting on that information and putting it in your own words. So in the modeling course this past spring, I really worked on that. I also helped them realize that writing is not the thing that you do at the very end after you've gotten your work done, but it is something that you start early so that you can add to it and that you can refine, and so that it continues to help you think about your underlying process. The other thing that I did in another math course that I taught was, it was a numerical methods course, and it was during the pandemic. So I was teaching online, and I had written all of my notes on an iPad and posted them. Oh, great. Now I have those notes available. The next time I taught this course, those notes got posted beforehand. And during the Faculty Fellows Program, I was getting feedback on how to make exercises out of making the students read those notes before they came to class. And there were a lot of great papers that Cameron had given us that gave me ideas. Everything's not a summary. Okay, get them to do just a 3-minute jot. That's something that students could do quickly. I put your stopwatch on, write for 3 minutes, stop when the 3 minutes are up. Give me 5 main ideas or 3 main ideas that you got from these notes. So that became another mechanism I could use. Cameron mentioned the writing group that I have started inside our school. And what I do with them is we go through ideas on how to bring more writing in. The main hurdle that I'm finding in introducing writing to faculty in general is time. These things have to be graded. And it seems like an extra content component that has to be graded. And I find that in my engineering classes with these summaries, I still have to train my graders how to evaluate this content. That's very difficult. And especially in math, when I have a lot of non-native English speakers that are doing the grading for me, I almost feel like I have to train them. This is what I'm looking for in this summary. This is, I want this writing style to evolve. Students are not going to be very good at this at the beginning. I am not giving them a template. I'm giving them ideas to help them find their voice, but this can be rough at first. And so that's also been a struggle, but that big component of obtaining the buy-in from the faculty is just that time in grading. So I'm continuing with the working group. I'm trying to get a course developed. What I realized in this modeling course is that we don't have a course in our major where students read papers and write summaries of papers, or read papers and use that information to get their own ideas. I found this in my own writing process. As I'm writing up my research, I find mistakes. I find gaps and holes. And so they need to understand that this is part of this process, that this writing is actually part of the research profile, and not just, oh, I'm going to get these tasks done and then I'm going to write about it. You do the task, you write about them, and it should be a continuous cycle loop. So those are some of the things that I'm trying to get done in this program. It's a work in progress. I feel like sometimes everybody else has these well-defined projects and mine's just a mess. But if you go in my office, if you go in my house, that's everything, right? Everything's just a mess and it's jumbled. And I just try to find these pieces that I can put together and get some nice end product. So I still think I'm looking for that, but I think that for me is the fun part. It's just this involvement in figuring out how to manage this writing across the curriculum. So those are some of the outcomes. I'm still looking at trying to get that executive summary, the best way to teach that, the best way to train my graders for that, and continuing to develop this working group so that we can then propagate these ideas across to other math faculty.
Thank you, Elaine. That was really, really helpful. Who would like, Arwen, would you like to go next? Arwen is working at Prisma Health. So she's an affiliate faculty with Clemson, and has been, well, she'll tell you, but working on a mentoring program sort of writ large. So
yes, I'll tell you all about it. So I'm an emergency physician, and it's really been a special and unique opportunity for me to be part of this program as an affiliate fellow. So thank you, Cameron. And it's really been neat to hear the work of my colleagues and kind of get a bigger feel for what's going on within the university setting. So as an emergency physician, part of what I do is research. And a lot of the way that we teach and we work outside of the medical school education context is by mentoring. And as I thought about what that would mean in terms of writing, I do a fair amount of mentored writing where I ask a student to write an abstract, or I ask them to write a summary of what they've done, or I work with them to help prepare a poster that has written and visual components. And all of these they're all topically based. They're really a project-based learning type setting where we have our defined scientific question that we're working with, and we're working within that space. So I didn't realize it when I started this, but of course, working in that kind of context is very much what writing in the disciplines is about. And we have this opportunity to refine and revise our work iteratively. So the first step of my work for the faculty fellowship was to really explore what was going on in that mentored writing space. So my goal was to just sequentially work through, and with each project, each mentee who was writing, to look at their work and just find one thing that I could recommend they would improve, one resource that they could look at that was related to that. And then really to give them one round of feedback and to see what they did with it. Did something click, and did they follow through? Or unfortunately, there was one student who really just didn't do anything with the feedback. But in general, it was really neat to see that pretty much everybody else picked up something, and they changed their writing, and that was really neat to see. So I shifted from that to thinking, once I had kind of a collection of observations and experiences, to ask what I could really do with that. I was finding all of these resources that honestly I didn't really know existed. And I was starting to see there were common themes. So students often needed some fairly basic work on their writing style. And a lot of it would be, do your verbs match your subjects, things like that. But then kind of advancing through and working with graduate level learners, and a couple of my faculty colleagues actually let me kind of critique their work. I was really able to look at some more complicated opportunities to think about how their paragraphs were flowing, or how their structure was flowing and their argument was flowing. And the thing that I felt was really missing was a way for us to break down those different pieces into a framework. And I think that is really, building a framework is really my key take home from all of this. And so this is something where I can look at a piece of work, and as I look for that one thing, how do I categorize that? How do I say, okay, we really need to go back and talk about what you're trying to tell your listener. Have we made sure that we've communicated the substance, and that we're on the right track? Or are we working with the structure, the scientific argument, which is pretty well described in the scientific literature, because we have this IMRAD framework where we start with our introduction, we go to our methods, talk about results, and so forth. But that can be something that is unfamiliar across a variety of levels. There's actually quite a bit of literature on that. Or is it something that's related to sequence, style, or just kind of this big concept, what's out there for support? So that's actually something that I ended up putting into a grant. Of course, my time is very much clinical, and so I have to look for the pieces of opportunity to cover time to work on things. And I would love in the future not only to put that through some ongoing mentoring and ongoing development, but also to think of maybe putting it into a workshop and really fleshing out the details of the key components of that framework. And I have a couple thank yous. Of course, Pixabay, so we need good pictures, but Dr. Bushnell for leading this, Sarah Costley, who does a lot of the organizational work. Dr. Windsor Sherrill is our Chief Scientific Officer, and she was the impetus for me to get involved in this. And I didn't put them up there, but our librarians have been just super helpful. We have an incredible library program over at Prisma Health, and I'm actually more than happy to talk to anybody who has questions about that. But if anybody has questions or interest, my email is up there as well. Thank you.
If that's all right with you.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and get started talking about mine. So the title of my project is Using Critiques as Effective Writing Tools in a Graphic Communications Classroom. So I came up with this idea based on a a previous research project that I had conducted on the most needed competencies for graphic communications higher ed programs. And coming out of that, many of the competencies were soft skills related. So things like critical thinking, problem solving, but the number 2 competency was communication, and that included both written and verbal. So I decided to focus then on written communication for my program. And in GC, most of our learning assessments are based on projects, whether it be large projects or small scale exercise type projects. So I wanted to look for and discover the best teaching strategies to teach communication, written communication in our curriculum. A lot of the writing in our department comes from technical reports. So that's what our students are doing predominantly. So I wanted to develop a more creative approach to writing in my discipline. And I have the opportunity to teach 2 of our introductory classes that our freshmen take coming in. And these are foundational classes focusing in design, essentially. So they learn computer applications. A lot of the projects are visual, so posters, flyers, business cards, those kinds of things. So I wanted to take some of those projects and have the students do peer critiques and then self-critiques as well. So at the beginning of the semester, I had the students complete, oh, I need to advance my slides. I had the students complete a Daily Miller writing apprehension test. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. There's one. And I wanted to use this tool measures the level of anxiety that students have around writing. And I thought, since this is a freshman group, it would be interesting to see if they're coming in with that type of anxiety. And I'll tell you the results in just a few minutes. And I also, from Cameron's recommendation, added an open-ended question at the end of that survey on design, because I wanted to see if their understanding of design evolved and improved over time through the course of the semester. I also created some lectures on how to give effective critique and criticism. And then the students completed 2 self-critiques, 2 peer critiques, and then some more directed writing exercises that where I gave them more specific things that I wanted them to write about. So verbal critiques have often been used in my discipline to evaluate things like graphic designs and paintings and drawings and that kind of thing. And having taught several graphic design courses in the past, I had utilized verbal critiques to help students give constructive feedback. However, I was finding as time progressed that students were a bit apprehensive in giving negative or critical feedback to their peers. I think they were afraid of hurting feelings, to be honest. So it resulted in kind of a stale discussion that wasn't really beneficial for the students at all. So I was hoping by utilizing these written critiques that the students would feel a bit more comfortable and a bit freer to express their real opinion, while also getting some experience in writing. So I wanted to give them several different exercises that would help them to become more effective writers and better creative writers too. So the outcomes, and I'm not finished, I have a lot of data to get through, but the pre and post test averages from the Daily Miller test were comparable, which indicated to me that the students do not have a significant and not an unusual apprehension to writing. So I think that's a good thing. I do have some additional analysis to determine if the students are evaluation, stress, and product apprehensive. And those are 3 categories that students may or may not fall into from this Daily Miller test. So I have some more analysis to do on that. I'm also working on analyzing the open-ended responses, and I'm looking for a good text analysis software to use for that. I'm looking at Luke right now. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, or if you have any recommendations for me, I'd love to hear those. But I want to do that to assess the actual critiques. Luke will analyze things like analytical thinking, emotional intelligence, but I'm also looking for more specific things like how well they use design terminology and more skills-based knowledge. And I do plan to gather both quantitative and qualitative data. And I'm presenting my findings later this summer at a graphic communications conference. And I'm working on a paper right now as well for possible publication. So this fellowship was very beneficial and enjoyable for me. It gave me a chance to work with people that I otherwise wouldn't have met. And I loved learning different strategies for writing that I could include in my courses. So thank you.
All right, and Rochelle. I don't think Rochelle knows. Oh, you do have.
Well, I do
oh,
have
yeah.
slides. I mean, they're not comprehensive like theirs, but so I can just speak. And I think it's great that I'm ending because I feel I can speak to a little bit of everything that everybody has said. Like Lee, I feel like my program and my goals and project are still coming together and has been messy. And just a little bit of background. I started off in the communication department teaching public speaking, and I was brought into the civil engineering department to be the communication specialist in working with all of the faculty and developing communication curriculum, not just writing, but public speaking within several of the classes. So this is part of, this was an experiment unto itself because it was a National Science Foundation grant called Revolutionizing Engineering Departments. And a key component of the grant was to embed communication into the curriculum, to bring writing into the discipline, in the hopes that that the assignments would reflect what they're going to do as an engineer in the field, and that it would increase their interest and help them identify quicker as an engineer and develop confidence as they're communicating. It's been messy because some of the faculty haven't been as on board with this. You know, it's messy to change all of this. And so this program has been great and has provided me the support and the safe space to kind of just like, vent and get support and how do I do this? And, and even some of the students were like, why do I have to do this? But as Cameron spoke at the beginning, a lot of our students weren't even getting into these classes because they're so full on campus. So they were taking technical writing through the English department, and they were taking COM 2500, which is our gen ed public speaking course. They were supposed to take that their freshman semester, like fall semester. And we found that a lot of them weren't even getting in until their last semester as a senior while they're doing their capstone class, and the presentations were horrible. And so a driving factor of this change was also that we were hearing consistently from our industry partners and our alumni that our students were really lacking in their professional skills, and particularly in communication, and that this was an area that we really needed to work with them on. I think a lot of engineers think that they, so my program, I'm sorry, I'm going to just go back up. My program was called Voice because it's not just about writing. It was about visual, oral, and written communication. And so my goal was to create, and I'm still working on it, creating a hub within our computer system that would be a place where they could go for all of these resources, whether it's here's a sample of an exemplar of how to write an engineering memo, a report, a field memo, to here's, like Canva and different resources that they can use to create visual aids within their work. We want to do more skills assessments. A huge part of this is emphasizing to the students that this is critical to their success as an engineer. And I was sharing as I came in that I just returned last night from spending a week with an engineering firm, immersing myself into their business and meeting with like 40 people this week and getting feedback from all of them about how the success of their career and the company really hinges on communication. It's understanding your audiences. And so we talk about that, and how do we write succinctly and specifically and concisely and accurately so that, it does translate to dollars lost or now we're liable for something. And so getting the students to understand that. This is a picture from our hard hat ceremony in the fall where we introduce them to the department and try to help them identify as an engineer. A lot of the students, right, they come into the field because they think they can avoid all of this. They just want to do their calculations and, sit in the corner. And so they're surprised when it's like, no, 75% of what you're going to be doing is communicating. So we want to introduce them to these genres that they're going to produce in the field to really, as Amanda said, like build their confidence. This isn't something, especially this group of students, that they are real comfortable with. And so I didn't do the formal assessment that Amanda did, but just more of we had kind of a little quiz when, rank 1 to 10, like how comfortable are you with public speaking and how comfortable are you with writing? And they're nervous and not comfortable in the beginning, and there has been some growth over the semester. And then just, creating a supportive system that would be there regardless of which classes they're in, because I am team teaching with multiple faculty members from the sophomore level, excuse me, all the way to the capstone class in the senior year. And so I just come in a few times a semester in the classroom and then assign these assignments and, grade them and provide feedback that way. So it's not like we have one class. I'm working with multiple faculty members to deliver this. Okay. Yeah, so a large part of what I'm doing is creating a style guide for our department and having consistency in how we're writing something. I'm a former journalist, and so like the AP's writing style guide, something like that, this is, as Arwen said, a lot of what I have found is students need help even remembering which words are supposed to be capitalized, that proper nouns are capitalized, and, subject verb agreement, and, common writing mistakes like misusing words like cite, S-I-T-E versus C-I-T-E. And we will literally get those kinds of mistakes. So we are working on that. And I have been pulling examples from the industry and accumulated several this week to place in this system as examples of here's how you write a memo, here's how you write a cover letter, and just all the different genres that they'll produce. And on that note, the cover letter, just something as simple as a cover letter and writing a formal business letter was a new concept. And I actually got pushback from students on it this past spring. Why do I have to do this? Who writes like this? Who talks like this? And I was taken aback. And I was trying to not be unprofessional, but because in my head, I'm like, what are you talking about? And so I just said, I'm not sure that I fully understand your question. Can you please help me understand what you're asking? And he said, who writes like this? Nobody I know writes like this. And I probably was a little too snotty, but I was just like, this is how professionals communicate. Like, this is what professionals in the workplace do. And you will have to write a business letter like this with, proper punctuation and capitalization and all these things, because they just think that it doesn't matter. And so part of what I constantly say to them is your language, your words matter just as much as your calculations. And this speaks to your credibility and your professionalism. And one of the things that I say to them is, if you can't spell my name right, which is all over the place, on the syllabus, all over Canvas. If you can't spell my name right on this letter or this email, why should it? And that shows me you're careless. You're not paying attention to detail. I'm not, it's not accurate. So how can I trust that the calculations that you're doing are accurate, or that this is the kind of sloppy work that you would do as an engineer? And why should I hire you then? So that's how I'm trying to pull it all together and get them to understand that, it does matter. Communication matters. Thank you. And yes, thank you, Cameron, because this has been an amazing experience. And Cameron has introduced us to a variety of experts that literally every month was just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And we're learning, we would just have fantastic conversations about the material that we read.
Thank you, Rochelle. Thank you, everyone, for your presentations. Really. Well, great. As I hope we have quite a bit of time for questions, either the specifics of what it is that our fellows have done or anything about the program in general, or just comments about your own efforts. We would love to hear. So would anyone? Yeah. Okay. Megan, David, would you mind running the?
Yeah,
mic? Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was really, really informative and interesting and helpful. I aspire to a program like this at my institution, and so I have many questions, but I'll just start with one. Tell me about your incentive for participating. None of you have time to spare. So, and I know that you weren't paid truckloads of money to do it. So what brought you in, and what would you recommend to somebody like, Cameron's corollary at a different institution? Like, what kinds of incentives are most meaningful for giving your time to something like this? Thank you.
Well, I was just gonna say, oh, sorry for situation is probably a little different, because a huge part of this for me was credibility, that I don't have a PhD, and I have a variety of professional experience and communication that I bring to the table, but the academic portion of my career isn't strong. And so participating in a program like this, where we're studying journal articles and communicating together and working on a project, I hoped would provide some more credibility with my colleagues, and that they would buy into the program that we're doing better. The camaraderie and the just connecting with different professionals across the campus that can be resources to, as we're continuing to develop this program, was beneficial to me.
I would say I just wanted to be a better teacher. I wanted to get the most out of my students, and I wasn't feeling fulfilled in just having them do some calculations. I felt that they just didn't understand enough about what was going on. So it was personal. I think I would have done it without the money. The money was nice, but it helped me figure out, because I'm not a communicator. I'm not a writer. That's not my background. And coming into this program gave me access to resources I would not have been able to find otherwise. And to talk with people like Cameron who know what they're doing. It's like, oh yeah, I can do that. That's an easy thing to implement. It helped me.
I'll give you kind of 3 answers. The first one is that I like writing. I love reading. And when I saw the recruitment emails come out, I went, oh man, I wish I were eligible for that. And, I read through all of them, and I actually thought I wasn't eligible. And I kind of had a mental plan of, this would be amazing. I would love to look at it like this, because I had found a couple of the scientific writing focused resources and had been working with them for a couple of years on my own writing. The second answer is, I think Cameron knows exactly how much faculty time is kind of covered in terms of the finances. And I did, before I committed, sit down and just kind of lay out what that time meant for me and what I felt I could reasonably do this year. And the third answer is that I actually ignored all of the recruitment emails until I got one from Cameron saying, Dr. Cheryl specifically wanted me to make sure that you knew you were eligible. So those are mine.
I'll say real quickly, I'm in a tenure track position, so that was one reason. And I'm fairly new to Clemson. I haven't been here very long. So I wanted to meet some people outside of my department. So that was a big incentive. And also one of my research areas is curriculum development and assessment. So this fit perfectly with what I wanted to do. Sure.
I think the one thing I would kind of add to echo that is that this is intended to be embedded within our spaces. And so when I looked at the time, and I think what I've heard from everybody else is that there's a supplemental component in a way. There's this opportunity to hear people who have expertise to read outside of our own disciplines. And that's very focused. And a lot of the opportunity is to develop within our spaces. And so it's almost like having extra help.
Sorry.
Thank you. I was actually going to ask a similar question, but luckily I have a second question. And it's sort of the opposite, which is, Cameron, how did you go about marketing this? Did you have sort of an idea of who you were going to try to recruit already? What partnerships did you have already that allowed you to kind of get into and find the people who were going to be intrinsically motivated and not necessarily like, oh, I'll do it for the money, right? Which obviously, no.
I appreciate that question. Thank you. Pierce Center sponsored an Alan Alda workshop one year. And from those that signed up, from a very well-known sort of, so that's Alan Alda and scientific communication out of Stony Brook. And so that was online, and the people that applied for that position and were selected for that position, I was able to locate in that, from that particular opportunity that the Peer Center decided to sponsor on campus. It wasn't on campus, it was on Zoom during COVID. Identified the first cohort and found the people to invite. The second cohort, it has been, was a lot of word of mouth. So we're still getting recommendations from department chairs and from other administrators as to those that would benefit. So right now it's still, I'm hoping to eventually with the faculty workshops that we would then more generally offer, be able to select faculty fellows in that way. But I guess it will always be sort of an interchange, a conversation between various people that I meet both accidentally and serendipitously and on purpose. So
I was recommended through don't you have a board? Or, I mean, Coop is the one who told me.
yes.
So I don't, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so we do have a faculty advisory council, and Rochelle was recommended by one of our faculty advisory board to be, in fact, she said you must have Rochelle because she would be perfect.
I had gone to her for like, hey, I have to do this program and I'm running up against opposition. And so she's a friend and she was a peer, and it was like, what can I do? And she's like, you gotta be on the writing fellows. You gotta get into, and I hadn't even heard anything about it before. So yeah, she was like, this is a resource that will really help you develop your program.
Great, thanks for the question. Yes, Doug.
Thank you. Rochelle, I wondered about your position there. So were you originating the tasks that students were doing as well as responding them, or how did that work? Because it's,
The assignment?
yeah,
Yeah.
But as you might imagine, I have some follow-up thoughts on that, but please tell us a little bit how that works.
Yes, so Jennifer Ogle is our department chair, and she was really the one who recruited me to join this crazy venture and the program. And there's the Portland State University had a writing center program that they did and developed some curriculum. And so we started with that. I used that as a resource this first year. The students weren't keen on it because it's pretty dry and very grammar oriented. And we did writing exercises in the class. The thing that we have adopted really, and that's been great, is the field memo. And so where they have to go out, we've done a field trip, and they had to go out and write about that and report to me as if, you know, I'm not there, I'm your boss, so tell me what you observed. And so that we've kept that and we've embedded that into all of the classes.
So what is your follow-up then?
Yeah, sorry.
Well, the follow-up has to do with the buy-in or engagement or lack thereof of the faculty. In other words, if they were collaborating and here are the tasks we want you to work on, and versus, here's the communications journalist interloper coming in, ain't it great to have her, you just go. So it really had to do with the agency and how it was supported or not from your position.
Yes. I wish there was more of a really integrated team teaching collaboration from the beginning. I think that's been developing as they've seen the success of the program and they've seen students develop their voice, develop their confidence, and the writing has improved. There are colleagues that are much more collaborative, and so we talk about what assignment makes sense with what your curriculum is. Where should we do a public speaking? Should it be a speech? Should it be a presentation? If they're designing a project, then is there a report that they need to do? Is it both, or they need to present? So part of my exercise this week in the summer, being out in the field, gaining what really engineers are developing in the field, I will be bringing that back to the faculty, and you have the other challenge is most of our faculty are researchers and haven't ever worked out in the field. And the majority of our students go out into the field. So.
And I'll just say, I don't need the mic back, I'll talk louder. But I think the invaluable repository of artifacts and experience that you're bringing to that student who says, why do we have to do this crap? Like, well, son, so.
Yeah, here's the cover letter that had to be written with this 200-page proposal to get a $80 million job that this firm was going after. Like, that's why you have to do this.
Great. Yes, Alan.
Hello, everyone. This is Alan from the Chinese University of Hong Kong. And I remember Cameron just mentioned that there are some occasions on which the writing experts and the faculty members have dialogues, right, based on some target texts. Yeah, I'm quite interested in knowing whether in most cases, these two parties see eye to eye with each other about what constitutes a good piece of writing, or are there any occasions on which they have maybe very, very different opinions, maybe related to academic writing conventions, and how do you tackle this kind of maybe different opinions?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. That's a really good question. And I think I can, I'll just speak, you guys can jump in if you want, but we have read things that some people said, are you kidding? We cannot do that, is impossible. So yes, we have so there are times when what the writing community thinks might be possible or might be useful or is actually incredibly useful in a writing classroom or in the, you know, in the our English department or writing department centers. So and sometimes it is quite removed. On the other hand, many folks would say from our panels here, I would say, would read the writing experts and say, okay, I've actually never thought of it that way. And maybe I could, you know, that shakes up my thinking, which of course is what we are looking for, is a little bit of collision and coincidence to try to find some new ways of thinking. So it goes, I guess the answer is it goes both ways. For the most part, I think, and I don't know if anybody wants to comment, but for the most part, I think our disciplinary folks were open to the ideas, if not to adapt, if not to take straight across. Yeah, please.
I wanted to make a quick comment. Again, I'm not coming at this as a communication specialist. And a lot of the things that we would read, oh, get peer feedback or go through this cycle of improving writing. I don't have that kind of time, right? I'm teaching an engineering class and here's the things that we have to cover this semester. So I don't have time. Oh, we're going to reflect on this today. I'm going to give you feedback. You can rewrite this. That is not going to happen. So that process of improving your writing has to go with learning new tasks. And I think that is a little bit difficult. That I would say that was the major conflict that I had when I was reading some of these things. And then again, this standard way of, I think we had one piece that was writing in mathematics or something like that. And it was all about proofs. Well, that is not what I want to teach them. That is sort of standard. Mathematicians know how to do that. What mathematicians don't know how to do is to incorporate more general writing into the curriculum. So I would say that was where I had the most conflict with some of the things that we discussed.
I don't know, just to respond to you, Lee, I think that's really very useful. I think revision, which is the heart blood of, you know, writing instruction, is hard to introduce. And I've come up with this idea of serial revision, which is that you write this report, you get feedback, and the improvements don't happen on this report, but they happen on the next one. So I see a lot of nodding heads, so I'm not inventing the wheel here. But just an idea that revision with new tasks is what reminded me. Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks, Helen. Question? Okay, Megan. Okay.
Rochelle, you mentioned as your colleagues were seeing success, I'm wondering how you measure success and impact, how you all measure it. And if Cameron, you are like asking for that data from the fellows as a kind of justification for sustaining the program, impact is always in demand or proof of it.
I mean, I feel like Amanda's probably got the most data that she.
So since I wanted a publication out of this project and a professional presentation, I did try to really focus on the research part of it and gathering solid data. So I have the results of the pre and post tests, and I have quite a bit of qualitative data to comb through. So I'm figuring out ways to do that. And I'm of course, I would be happy to share that with the Pierce Center once I'm finished. But yeah, I think, and I did sort of an informal evaluation with my students at the end of the semester. Did you like this? Was it helpful? That kind of thing. And I got very positive feedback. So I feel like this is something that was successful for my students, and I am going to continue to implement it throughout future semesters. So it's a great way for them to get practice writing and to also, and we share the feedback, obviously, so they also get to improve their projects along the way. I don't know if that answered the question very well.
Well, For me, it's quantitative and anecdotal information we have at this point. So I started, my first cohort just graduated. And they were like my little babies. I was sad to see them leave. And so it was interesting because they were in the capstone class and, you know, they're in groups of 4 working as a team. The lead instructor came to me and wanted to know why, you know, some of the students were not delivering their presentations well and why they were, and I was like, those kids were not in Springer 2 or, you know, or Springer 1. This is the sophomore class. I'm like, they haven't come up through the program. There's like 5 students in this class right now that have come up through the program. And those are the stars. They're the, I mean, it's clearly identifiable as these are the students who are very comfortable in delivering great presentations and their writing is vastly different than the remainder of the class. So the data that we have been working on is more about the public speaking at this point, because we have a software called PitchVantage that delivers scores every time they're in there. And so we've been pulling that. We are working on how do we do that from the writing perspective and having like a pre and post assessment in every year so that we could track over time from the sophomore to the senior year, like what is their rate of improvement. Does anybody else? No.
Just to say, Megan, so far, all of our information as a program has been anecdotal and sort of keeping in touch with folks. So we've had some surveys of responses on the way out, but at this point, nothing more than just sort of keeping track of the various projects and trying to support the faculty fellows as they move on. So anecdotal.
Thanks very much. Thanks for your talks about the work that you're doing. It sounds like Michelle is doing a lot of work that has impact throughout engineering, and Lee and Amanda and Arwen, it sounds like yours are more focused on your individual classes. But it sounds also like you have some interest in sort of having an impact beyond just your individual class. Lee, you mentioned a writing group that you're doing within math. I'm really kind of curious about that. So I was just wondering to what extent those of you who are not sort of like really doing sort of the big curriculum stuff immediately, but are focusing on their individual classes, how do you see that your work having an impact in your departments at large? Do you see obstacles to the department sort of like, oh, the writing thing, that's great. I'm glad that you're doing it. Now the rest of us don't have to. Or do you see that there can be kind of like a spillover into other, amongst other faculty in the department?
So of course I will say, like I mentioned before, the big obstacle is grading. Everybody values the fact that you need to write, but oh my gosh, they have to take advanced calculus and they have to take abstract algebra. And where is this going to fit in their degree program? I assumed that the English department was taking care of this, because we checked that off on the gen ed, and what we found over multiple instances is that students are waiting to take these courses, and that just obliterates everything. So I started the small writing group just to gauge interest again and to banter. And I would say that it's still a slog to get the math community to decide that this is important, because many of the people in math have never been in industry, right? You do not have a lot of people. I'm one of the only people in my whole school who's ever worked in industry and who understands that you have to write. And so to get buy-in from the faculty, some are like, oh, this is great. And even then they still see it as, oh, eventually you're going to write a research article and you're going to be evaluating journal articles for publication, right? For review. So I need to be able to write a decent review. They still don't think about the different components and why the different components are necessary. The abstract is something that you tack on after you have written the research paper that you need to push it through for the journal. it's not a way to think about what you've done, to concisely describe what you've done, to be able to relate that to somebody else, to talk to somebody outside your discipline. So that's been a big slog, and I'm still not where I'd like to be. It's great that civil engineering has adopted this idea of communication. I would say that mechanical engineers like that would be the next hurdle. And again, it doesn't matter. I think sometimes, oh, well, you're going to have to do this. You don't know what you're talking about. You're some old woman in a classroom and I'm going to get Chat GPT to write that for me anyway. So who even cares? So you've got to have that coordination between disciplines. So when I talk to my engineering colleagues and stuff, I try to always bring up, okay, yeah, I'm trying to do this writing thing. So have you thought about how you're bringing this into your curriculum and things like that? Just so it's tiny baby steps. And I think that to believe that this would happen even, I don't know, a 5-year window would be nice to really get this embedded, because again, it's one of these things. I don't have time for that. I have to teach differentiation. I have to teach integration. I do not have to teach writing. Someone else is doing that. So that's a long-winded answer probably to your question. So long, I can't even hardly remember the original question.
Well, I'll touch on it in terms of challenges and opportunities. So in terms of challenges, I think Megan and Cameron have really kind of alluded to time being an issue, whether that's time in terms of just my colleagues being interested, or whether it's my personal time. Like, when am I actually going to put this together to be a workshop? When am I going to sit down and not just write this grant, but write the concept paper? Because once I write the concept paper, then I can do the next set. There is certainly some of that siloing, but in emergency medicine, which is a fairly young specialty in terms of medicine overall, there's quite a bit of growing academic interest. And, people are talking about what it means to peer review and what it means to publish and things like that. So I think there's an opening. And at this point, just from talking to people about this, I have 2 opportunities, just invitations. Tell me when you're ready and we'll host you for a workshop. So that's the big next step, is to start local workshops and to publish and to grow it into something where I can talk about it, not just within emergency medicine, but then I can come out and talk about it across all of medicine, really, and within the sciences. So probably not today or tomorrow, but maybe hopefully by the fall, open to invitations to do workshops, little talks.
Wait, and I would add something too, from another perspective. I think a big problem that we have across universities is that we have so many adjunct faculty, and they just don't stay around sometimes long enough for you to develop relationships that you need for the collaborations to push these incentives. They're trying to keep their heads above water. They're trying to make sure that they get good student reviews to keep their job or to get a better job. They're under completely different pressures. And I think there needs to be institutional change, if this is important to the entire university, to pull these faculty members into full-time positions and to help people develop these collaborations that move these things forward.
Well, we are at the end of a perfectly good, however many minutes we had, 75 minutes. And I thank you very much for coming today. It's really been nice to have a conversation with you. So thank you. Thanks to you. That was great.
That is so good.
I'm so happy that I remembered. That was like the past week. I remember this.